I stood frozen in the doorway, my fingers clutching the crystal doorknob so tightly my knuckles turned white. The world around me seemed to slow, sounds fading into a distant hum as I stared at the scene before me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Happy birthday to me, I whispered, the words barely audible even to my own ears. My husband, Ryan, didn't even glance up when I entered. He was too engrossed, leaning over his mahogany desk, showing Jessica, my best friend since college, something on his laptop. Their heads were bent close together, an intimacy that made my stomach clench. "The timing couldn't be better," Jessica said, her voice carrying that honeyed tone I'd always envied. She placed her hand on Ryan's shoulder, fingers lingering just a second too long. "Once the guests leave, you can tell her everything is over." I should have known something was wrong when Ryan insisted we celebrate my 35th birthday at our home, instead of the rooftop restaurant I'd been dreaming about for months. "It'll be more intimate," he'd said with that practiced smile, the one that had charmed juries across Boston for the past decade. The same smile that had convinced me year after year that our marriage was solid despite the late nights and increasingly separate lives. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was meant to be a celebration of everything we'd built. Together, not the moment I discovered it was all a carefully constructed lie. My name is Olivia Mitchell. Just 3 hours ago, I'd been standing in our walk-in closet, smoothing down the emerald silk dress I'd purchased specifically for tonight. The color complemented my auburn hair, which I'd spent an hour styling into loose waves. My mother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd left me before cancer took her 5 years ago, caught the light as I turned to check my reflection. "You look beautiful," Ryan had said from the doorway, his tall frame leaning against it with casual confidence. At 42, Ryan Mitchell was still as handsome as the day we'd met at Northwestern Law. His dark hair now held touches of silver at the temples, lending him that distinguished look that only seemed to elevate his status as one of Boston's most respected defense attorneys. I'd smiled at him, a flutter of hope in my chest. Maybe tonight would mark a turning point for us. Maybe, finally, we could recapture what we'd lost somewhere between his partnership at the firm and my growing success with my interior design business. "The caterers are set up downstairs," he'd continued, checking his watch, the Rolex I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. "Guests should start arriving in about an hour." I nodded, applying a final touch of lipstick. "Perfect. I just need a few more minutes." He hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, then simply nodded and disappeared back into the hallway. Looking back now, I should have read the tension in his shoulders, the slight furrow between his brows. But I'd been too caught up in the fantasy that tonight represented, a chance to reconnect, to remind ourselves and our friends of the power couple we'd once been. Our home in Beacon Hill was the perfect showcase for both our successes. The 19th century brownstone had been my pet project 3 years ago, combining Ryan's love of traditional architecture with my more contemporary design sensibilities. Every corner reflected our 15 years together, from the vintage law books displayed prominently in his study to the collection of art we'd acquired during trips to Paris, Tokyo, and Barcelona. Tonight, the house had been transformed into a glittering display of my design capabilities. White lilies, my favorite, adorned every surface, their scent mingling with the aroma of gourmet hors d'oeuvres prepared by the exclusive catering company Ryan had insisted on hiring. Edison bulbs strung across our courtyard garden cast a warm glow over the early September evening, reflecting in the koi pond we'd installed last spring. Everything was perfect. Everything except us. The first guests had arrived precisely at 8 o'clock. Taylor and Marcus Washington, he a fellow attorney at Ryan's firm, she a pediatric surgeon at Mass General. They'd brought an expensive bottle of champagne and warm smiles. "Happy birthday." "Liv," Taylor had exclaimed, embracing me tightly. "35 looks amazing on you." I'd laughed. accepting her compliment graciously while Ryan guided Marcus toward the bar he'd set up in the corner of our living room. More friends had filtered in, colleagues from Ryan's firm, clients I'd designed spaces for, neighbors from our exclusive street. And then Jessica had arrived, fashionably late as always, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant chignon, her black dress hugging her slender frame in a way that made heads turn. Jessica Adams had been my roommate at Northwestern, the one who'd actually introduced me to Ryan during our second year. She'd remained a fixture in our lives through law school. Through our wedding, through Ryan's rise at the firm and my own career shifts. "There's the birthday girl," she'd called out, making her way through the crowd to envelop me in a cloud of her signature perfume. "This place looks incredible, Liv. You've outdone yourself." I'd beamed at her, genuinely happy to see my oldest friend. "I'm so glad you could make it. I know how busy you are with the foundation." Jessica had taken over her father's charitable foundation 3 years ago after his unexpected death. The Adams Family Foundation was one of Boston's most prestigious philanthropic organizations, focusing on educational opportunities for underprivileged children. Jessica's position as director had elevated her already considerable social standing, making her one of the most sought-after dinner guests in our circle. "I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything," she'd said, squeezing my hand. "Is Ryan around? I need to discuss the foundation's annual gala with him. The firm is sponsoring a table again this year, right?" I'd pointed her toward the garden, where Ryan had been deep in conversation with a state senator. "He's out back. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk about it." That had been nearly 2 hours ago. The party continued to pulse around me. Laughter, conversation, the clink of crystal glasses. While I played the perfect hostess, making sure everyone had drinks, introducing acquaintances who might benefit from knowing each other, and accepting birthday wishes with gracious smiles. But as the evening progressed, I'd noticed Ryan's absence, and then Jessica's. At first, I thought nothing of it. Ryan often retreated to his study during parties, taking important calls or simply needing a moment away from the crowd. And Jessica knew our home well enough to make herself comfortable wherever she pleased. It wasn't until Diana Reynolds, my new client and rapidly becoming a close friend, had asked about them that a flicker of concern had sparked within me. "Where's that handsome husband of yours hiding?" Diana had asked, sipping her martini. "And Jessica disappeared a while ago, too. They're missing all the fun." Diana's innocent question had planted a seed of unease that grew as I scanned the crowded rooms, searching for Ryan's tall figure or Jessica's distinctive blonde updo. Neither was anywhere to be seen. "I'm sure they're around somewhere," I'd replied, forcing a smile. "Ryan probably got caught up in work talk. You know how lawyers are? They can't help themselves." Diana had laughed, but her eyes, sharp and observant, had held a flicker of something I couldn't quite identify. "On your birthday? That man needs to learn when to put the briefcase away." I nodded, making a mental note to find Ryan and gently remind him of his hosting duties. The party was for me, after all. The least he could do was be present. Excusing myself, I'd begun moving through our home, navigating between clusters of guests with practiced ease. Our house, though spacious, suddenly felt maze-like as I searched each room. The kitchen, where the caterers worked efficiently, the formal dining room, where our most distinguished guests had settled into conversation, the sunroom where several younger couples were comparing notes on the city's hottest new restaurants. No Ryan, no Jessica. A cold sensation had begun to spread through my chest as I made my way upstairs, away from the party's vibrant energy. The second floor was quiet, the sounds from below muffled by thick carpets and heavy doors. I'd checked our bedroom, half expecting to find Ryan changing his tie or taking a business call in private. Empty. The guest rooms were similarly vacant. Only one space remained unchecked, Ryan's study at the end of the hall. As I approached the partly open door, I'd heard their voices, low, intimate, conspiratorial. I'd slowed my steps, an instinct I couldn't name holding me back from announcing my presence. "Everything is prepared," Jessica was saying, her tone confident in a way I'd never heard before. "I double-checked all the documents. Once you serve her the papers tonight, there's nothing she can do." Ryan's response had come after a brief pause. "You're sure about the timing? After the party, it seems cruel." "It's perfect timing," Jessica had replied smoothly. "She'll be emotional, vulnerable, more likely to sign quickly without scrutinizing everything." I'd felt the floor beneath me tilt, my hand reaching out to steady myself against the wall. The crystal necklace Ryan had given me for our anniversary suddenly felt heavy, constricting. "Brilliant," Ryan had said, admiration evident in his voice. "You really are brilliant. I couldn't have planned this without you." I'd remained frozen, unable to move, unable to process what I was hearing. My husband and my best friend, plotting. My downfall on my birthday. The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly orchestrated, that for a moment I questioned whether I was dreaming. Then Jessica had laughed. That melodic sound I'd always envied, now twisted into something sinister. "We make a good team, Ryan. We always have." Those words had finally propelled me forward, my body moving before my mind could fully comprehend what was happening. And now here I stood, in the doorway of Ryan's study, watching as the two people I trusted most in the world conspired to destroy everything I'd built. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The stack of legal documents spread across Ryan's desk came into sharp focus: divorce papers, financial statements, property assessments. My name appeared repeatedly, alongside terms like dissolution, division of assets, and settlement. In that moment, as I stood unnoticed in the doorway, something inside me shifted. The initial shock gave way to a cold clarity, a sudden understanding of patterns I'd been too trusting to see. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the way Ryan had insisted on handling our finances despite my growing success. Jessica's increased presence in our lives, her countless lunch dates with Ryan to discuss foundation business. It all made horrible, perfect sense. And yet, as I watched them pore over the documents that would end my marriage, I felt a strange calm descend. The Olivia Mitchell who had walked up those stairs 15 minutes ago, hopeful, trusting, naive, was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. Someone with ice in her veins and fire in her heart. I could slip away now, pretend I hadn't seen or heard anything, return to my birthday party and continue playing the role of the blissfully unaware wife. That would give me time to think, to plan, to prepare my own counter-strategy. Or I could step into that room and confront them both, watch their faces as they realized their carefully laid plans had been discovered. The music from the party drifted up the stairs. Ironically, it was our wedding song. Below, dozens of guests continued celebrating, raising glasses to toast my 35th year, completely unaware of the drama unfolding above them. I took a deep breath, my fingers finally releasing their death grip on the doorknob. Whatever choice I made in the next few seconds would define not just this night, but the rest of my life. In the study, Ryan leaned closer to Jessica, their heads nearly touching as they examined what appeared to be bank statements. His hand rested casually on her shoulder, thumb tracing small circles on the bare skin exposed by her dress. "We should get back to the party soon," he murmured. "People will start wondering where we are." Jessica smiled, that confident smile I'd always admired but now saw in an entirely new light. "Let them wonder. We have more important things to handle right now." I watched as she reached into her purse and extracted a small flash drive. "Everything's on here. The offshore accounts, the property transfers, the foundation's special projects. Once these are filed, half of what she thinks is hers will be protected." Ryan took the drive, slipping it into his pocket with practiced ease. And she'll never know what hit her. God, Jess, I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper as she leaned even closer. The kiss they shared wasn't passionate or desperate. It was comfortable, familiar. The kiss of two people who had done this many times before. Something inside me shattered at the sight. Not my heart, which had gone strangely numb, but my perception of the past 15 years. Every memory, every shared moment, every confession and promise suddenly cast in a different light. How long has this been going on? How much of my life has been a carefully constructed lie? As they pulled apart, Ryan glanced at his watch, the Rolex I'd saved for months to buy him. We should head back down. It's almost time for the cake. Jessica nodded, gathering the papers into a neat stack and sliding them into a folder. Just remember, once everyone leaves, you give her these. She tapped the folder meaningfully. Don't waver. Don't let her talk you into waiting. Tonight is perfect. She'll be blindsided, emotional, and more likely to sign without reading the fine print, Ryan finished. I know, it's why we planned it this way. I felt something rise within me then, not just anger or betrayal, but a cold, calculating clarity I'd never experienced before. In that moment, standing undetected in the doorway while the life I thought I had crumbled before my eyes, I made a decision. They thought they knew me. They thought they could predict my reactions, manipulate my emotions, use my trust against me. They were wrong. I was Olivia Mitchell. I had built a successful design business from nothing while supporting Ryan's career. I had navigated Boston's elite social circles with grace and intelligence. I was not some fragile doll to be discarded when convenient. As I watched them prepare to return to my birthday party, their secret safely tucked away, I felt a strange sense of power growing within. Me, they had their plan, now I would make mine. I carefully backed away from the study door, my heart hammering against my ribs as I forced myself to breathe normally. The grandfather clock at the end of the hallway showed nearly 10 o'clock. I had been gone from my own party for almost 20 minutes. Someone would come looking for me soon. With practiced composure, I smoothed down my emerald dress and headed toward the stairs, pausing in the guest bathroom to check my reflection. Remarkably, I looked normal. The woman staring back at me wasn't visibly broken, though everything inside me had shattered. I splashed cool water on my wrists, a trick my mother had taught me to calm nerves before important presentations, and reapplied my lipstick. You can do this, I whispered to my reflection. Just get through tonight. As I descended the staircase, the sounds of the party enveloped me once more. Laughter, conversation, the jazz quartet playing in the corner of our living room. For a moment, I felt like I was floating above it all, disconnected from the celebration, happening in my honor. Diana spotted me immediately, weaving through the crowd with 2 champagne flutes in hand. There you are. I was about to organize a search party. She handed me one of the glasses, studying my face carefully. Everything okay? I forced a smile, accepting the champagne. Of course. Just needed a moment of quiet. You know how these things can get overwhelming. Diana's dark eyes narrowed slightly. At 52, she had the kind of perception that comes from decades navigating the treacherous waters of high society. As the widow of a tech entrepreneur, she'd seen her share of betrayals and backstabbing. If you say so, she said, clearly, unconvinced. But if something's wrong... It's just birthday blues, I interrupted, not wanting her sympathy. Not yet. Another year older, another year wondering where the time went. She blinked her glass against mine. Well, from where I'm standing, 35 looks damn good on you. Before she could press further, the crowd parted as Ryan and Jessica emerged from the hallway leading to his study. They entered separately. Jessica first, then Ryan a calculated minute later, but I caught the subtle glance they exchanged. a silent communication perfected over God knows how long. My stomach clenched, but I maintained my smile as Ryan approached, sliding his arm around my waist with practiced ease. "There's my birthday girl," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Sorry I disappeared. The Peterson case has some new developments I had to discuss with Jessica. Foundation business got mixed in, too." His lie came so smoothly, so naturally, that for a split second I almost believed him. Had he always been this good at deception, or had I simply been too trusting to notice? The Peterson case? On my birthday? I kept my tone light, teasing, though my insides burned with each word. Ryan at least had the decency to look somewhat contrite. I know, terrible timing, but that's the last work talk for tonight, I promise." He squeezed my waist. "The next few hours are all about celebrating you." Jessica approached then, champagne in hand, her smile dazzling as she joined our small circle. "Ryan was just filling me in on the firm's contribution to our scholarship program," she said smoothly. "But enough about that. Diana, that dress is stunning." "Valentino?" As the conversation shifted to fashion, I watched Jessica carefully. Had there been signs I'd missed? Moments of tension or awkwardness that I'd dismissed? Looking back now, with the veil of trust torn away, memories began to resurface. 3 months ago, Ryan and I at the Henderson's summer gala. Jessica arrived late, making a beeline for Ryan while I was caught in conversation with the museum director. Their heads bent close together for nearly 20 minutes before separating. When I approached, "Foundation business," Ryan had explained when I asked later that night. "Jessica's father left some complicated arrangements that she's trying to untangle." 2 months ago, finding Ryan's cell phone on the kitchen counter while he showered, the screen lit up with a text from Jessica. "We need to move forward with the plan. Time's running out." When I'd casually mentioned it over breakfast, Ryan had laughed it off. "Just the charity auction. Jessica's worried we won't secure the venue in time." 6 weeks ago, coming home early from a client meeting to find Jessica's car in our driveway, entering to hear hushed voices from Ryan's study that immediately stopped when my heels clicked on the marble foyer. They'd emerged with folders and laptops, all business and explanations about foundation documents that needed legal review. 1 month ago, Ryan suddenly suggested we delay our planned anniversary trip to Santorini. "Work is just too hectic right now," he'd said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Let's postpone until fall. It'll be less crowded anyway." That same week, Jessica had canceled our traditional girls' lunch for the first time in years. The signs had been there all along, scattered like breadcrumbs leading to tonight's revelation. I had simply refused to follow the trail. "Earth to Olivia." Diana's voice broke through my thoughts. "Where did you go just now?" I blinked, realizing I'd been staring blankly at Jessica while lost in my recollections. "Sorry, just thinking about all the candles waiting for me on that cake. Enough to be a fire hazard at this point." The joke landed well enough, earning laughs from those nearby. Ryan's hand remained at my waist, but I now felt every point of contact like a burn. "Speaking of which," he said, checking his watch again, "I think it's about time. The caterers should have everything ready." "Perfect," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Lead the way." As the crowd began moving toward the dining room where the cake waited, I caught Jessica watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Concern? Guilt? Or merely calculation? Whatever it was, she quickly masked it with another brilliant smile and raised her glass in my direction before turning to follow the others. I lingered for a moment, allowing the crowd to move ahead. Diana paused, looking back at me. "Coming?" I nodded. "Just need a second. Save me a good spot." Once alone in the now empty living room, I took a deep, shuddering breath. The documents I'd seen on Ryan's desk flashed in my mind. Divorce papers, financial statements, evidence of their betrayal. They planned to spring it on me tonight after the guests left. They expected me to crumble, to sign whatever they put in front of me without question. They didn't know me as well as they thought. With newfound resolve, I straightened my shoulders and followed the sound of my guests gathering, plastering on, a smile as I prepared to blow out candles and make a wish. And oh, what a wish it would be. The cake was a masterpiece of sugar and artistry. 3 tiers of vanilla bean and raspberry, covered in hand-painted fondant that echoed the design motifs of our home. 35 candles circled the base, their flames casting a warm glow over the assembled guests. "Speech!" someone called as I approached, triggering a chorus of agreement from the crowd. Ryan stood beside the cake, champagne flute raised, his handsome face the picture of an adoring husband. "Yes, let's hear from the birthday girl before she makes her wish." The room quieted, all eyes turning expectantly toward me. In that moment, standing before friends and colleagues who had no idea of the drama unfolding beneath the surface, I made a split-second decision. I would play along. For now. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice carrying across the hushed room. "Looking around at all your faces, I'm reminded how blessed I am to have such wonderful people in my life." My eyes found Jessica's in the crowd, and I smiled directly at her. People I can truly count on. I saw a flicker of something, uncertainty, cross her perfect features before she raised her glass in acknowledgement. 35 years, I continued. They say it's when life really begins, when you know who you are and what you want. I turned to Ryan, meeting his gaze steadily. When you can finally see things clearly. A subtle tension crept into his posture, though his smile remained fixed in place. "To clarity," I concluded, raising my glass. "And to new beginnings." The crowd echoed my toast, unaware of the double meaning behind my words. As I leaned forward to blow out the candles, I made my wish, not for reconciliation or understanding, but for strength. The strength to face what was coming and emerge victorious. The party continued for another hour after the cake. I moved through it like an actress in a play, laughing at jokes, accepting gifts, thanking guests for coming. All while acutely aware of Ryan and Jessica's movements, the subtle glances they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. By midnight, only a handful of guests remained. Diana was among them, helping direct the caterers as they cleaned up. "You sure you don't want me to stay longer?" she asked as she gathered her wrap and clutch. "We could open another bottle, have a proper post-mortem of the evening." I was tempted, so tempted, to ask her to stay, to blurt out everything I'd discovered. But instinct told me to wait. "I'm exhausted," I said instead. "Rain check for tomorrow? Lunch at Pescatori's? It's a date." She squeezed my hand, that perceptive gaze lingering on my face. "Call me if you need anything before then. Anything at all." After seeing Diana out, I closed the front door and leaned against it, listening to the sounds of the caterers finishing in the kitchen. Ryan was in the dining room, examining the array of opened gifts spread across the table. Jessica had disappeared, to the powder room allegedly, but I suspected she was ensuring the divorce papers were ready for their grand reveal. I made a show of checking with the catering manager about final details, tipping generously and seeing them out the back entrance. When the last van pulled away, silence descended on the house. Ryan appeared in the kitchen doorway, jacket removed, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. The picture of casual relaxation. "Successful evening," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You looked beautiful tonight. Everyone was impressed with what you've done with the place." I leaned against the counter, studying him. The man I'd spent 15 years loving, building a life with, the stranger who had plotted my downfall with my best friend. "Thank you," I replied simply. An awkward silence stretched between us. I could almost see the thoughts racing behind his eyes, calculating the right moment, the right approach to spring his trap. "Olivia," he began, his tone shifting to something more serious. There's something we need to talk about. And there it was. The opening gambit. Actually, I interrupted smoothly, there's something I need to check first. One of the caterers mentioned they might have left a serving tray in your study. Would you mind if I look? Confusion flickered across his face, followed quickly by alarm. My study? No, I don't think. I can check for you. It's no trouble, I said, already moving past him toward the hallway. I know how particular you are about your space. I felt, rather than saw him tense, uncertainty disrupting his carefully laid plans. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. Olivia, wait. But I was already halfway down the hall, moving with purpose toward his study. I heard his footsteps behind me, then Jessica's voice from the direction of our powder room. Ryan? Is everyone gone? I pushed open the study door, flipping on the light. The room appeared exactly as I'd glimpsed it earlier. Masculine, meticulously organized, the leather and mahogany sanctuary where Ryan retreated from the world. And there on his desk, no longer hidden but displayed prominently, was the folder containing the divorce papers. I walked directly to it, aware of Ryan freezing in the doorway behind me. Is this what you wanted to talk about? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady as I placed my hand on the folder. Olivia, I can explain. Can you? I turned to face him, seeing Jessica appear behind him in the hallway, her face draining of color. Can you explain why you and my best friend have been planning to blindside me with divorce papers on my birthday? The shock on both their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. They hadn't expected this. Me in control, confronting them before they could execute their plan. You know? Ryan stammered, his usual eloquence deserting him. I know everything, I said, though it was only partially true. I knew enough. I heard you both earlier, planning how to serve me these papers when I'd be emotional and vulnerable, discussing offshore accounts and property transfers. Jessica stepped forward, her composure recovering first. Olivia, you don't understand. We were trying to find the best way to what, Jessica? To rob me blind? To end my marriage and steal my best friend in one calculated move? I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Please, enlighten me about what exactly I'm misunderstanding. Ryan moved into the study, hands raised in a placating gesture. This isn't how we wanted to do this. No? How exactly did you want to do it? Wait until all our friends had gone home, then ambush me when I was tired and had a few too many glasses of champagne? Was that the masterful plan from Boston's most brilliant attorney? His jaw tightened. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. Dramatic? I picked up the folder, flipping it open to reveal the papers inside. Are you secretly planning to divorce your wife of 15 years on her birthday dramatic? I scanned the first page, my suspicions confirmed by the formal language of dissolution. But something else caught my eye. Dates. Filing dates from 3 months ago. 3 months, I said, the pieces clicking into place. You've been planning this for at least 3 months. Ryan and Jessica exchanged a glance, that silent communication that now made my skin crawl. We didn't want to hurt you, Jessica said, stepping fully into the room. In the harsh light of the study, I noticed details I'd missed earlier. The diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist that matched Ryan's taste exactly. The confident way she moved in his space, as if she belonged there. That's why you chose my birthday. To minimize the hurt? I shook my head, continuing to leaf through the documents. And these offshore accounts? The property transfers? Those were for my benefit too, I suppose. Ryan's expression hardened. Those are complicated legal matters that I wouldn't understand? Poor, simple Olivia, too emotional to grasp complex financial strategies? I closed the folder with deliberate calm. I built a 6-figure business while supporting your career, Ryan. I understand perfectly well what you've been doing. This isn't productive, Jessica interjected. her PR training evident in her attempt to control the narrative. We should all take a breath and discuss this rationally tomorrow, when emotions aren't so high. I turned my gaze to her. This woman, I'd confided in, traveled with, supported through her father's death and her subsequent struggles with the foundation. There won't be a discussion tomorrow, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. Because tomorrow, everything changes. Ryan stepped forward, his attorney persona finally asserting itself. What does that mean exactly? I moved toward the door, folder in hand. It means that your plan, whatever it was, just failed. And now we're going to play by my rules. Jessica's perfectly manicured hand reached out, grasping my arm. Olivia, please. Let's talk about this like adults. Adults? I looked pointedly at her hand until she removed it. Adults don't conspire behind their friend's back. Adults don't plan to serve divorce papers at a birthday party. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. This is exactly why we wanted to handle it carefully. You're being irrational. No, Ryan. For the first time in a very long time, I'm seeing things exactly as they are. I clutched the folder to my chest. I'm taking these papers to review with my own attorney. I suggest you both prepare for what comes next. Those are confidential legal documents, Ryan protested, moving to block my exit. You can't just take them. I met his gaze steadily. Are you going to physically stop me? Add assault to your growing list of offenses? His eyes widened slightly, then he stepped aside. This isn't over, Olivia. As I passed Jessica, I paused, the weight of 15 years of friendship suddenly heavy between us. Was it worth it? I asked quietly. Throwing away all those years? For this? Something like regret flickered across her face, quickly replaced by resolve. You don't understand now, but someday you might. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Don't count on it. With that, I walked out of the study, out of the suffocating presence of their betrayal. My legs carried me up the stairs to our bedroom. No, my bedroom now. Once inside, I locked the door behind me, finally allowing my composure to crack. The folder slipped from my fingers onto the bed as I sank to the floor, back against the door, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The magnitude of the betrayal crashed over me in waves. My husband, my best friend, the life I thought I had. All lies. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to fall apart. 5 minutes of raw, unfiltered grief for the death of my marriage, my friendship, my trust. Then I wiped my eyes, stood up, and moved to my closet. From the back, I retrieved the small fireproof safe where I kept my most important documents. The combination, my mother's birthday, clicked into place, and I carefully placed the divorce papers inside. Evidence secured, I turned to my laptop. There would be no sleep tonight. I had research to do, calls to make, a strategy to formulate. Ryan and Jessica had spent months planning my downfall. Now I would plan their reckoning. Morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd forgotten to close. I hadn't slept at all. My laptop sat open beside me on the bed, dozens of tabs revealing the night's research, articles on divorce law in Massachusetts, guidelines for documenting financial infidelity, signs of hidden assets. My notepad was filled with hastily scrawled notes, names, and phone numbers. I checked my watch, 7:15 a.m. Ryan had spent the night in the guest room after several attempts to get me to open the door. His footsteps had passed my room at 6:30, followed by the sounds of the shower running in the hall bathroom. His morning routine was predictable. Shower, coffee, breakfast smoothie, out the door by 8 hours for his daily partners meeting at the firm. Moving quietly, I gathered what I needed: laptop, notepad, the folder of divorce papers, and my purse. I changed from my rumpled dress into jeans and a simple blouse, applied minimal makeup to hide the evidence of my sleepless night, and slipped on comfortable flats. Today wasn't about appearances, it was about action. I waited until I heard the front door close, then counted to 100 before emerging from the bedroom. The house was silent, still bearing remnants of last night's celebration. A forgotten wrap draped over a chair, a champagne flute on the mantel, the faint scent of lilies lingering in the air. In the kitchen, I found Ryan's note on the counter. "We need to talk tonight. Please be reasonable about this." I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. My first call was to Diana Reynolds. Despite the early hour, she answered on the second ring. "Olivia, everything okay?" "No," I said simply. "But it will be. Can you meet earlier than we planned? It's important." There must have been something in my voice that conveyed the urgency because she didn't hesitate. Of course. My place in an hour? Perfect. And Diana. Thank you. I ended the call and immediately dialed another number, one I'd found during my late-night research. Catherine Blackwell was reportedly Boston's most formidable divorce attorney, with a reputation for ruthlessness that had earned her the nickname the Executor among her peers. Her office wouldn't open until 9, but I left a detailed message requesting the earliest possible appointment. My next step required more courage. Taking a deep breath, I called my father. Robert Walsh had been a finance professor at Harvard, business school for 30 years before retiring to Cape Cod with my stepmother. He'd always been skeptical of Ryan, seeing through the charm to what he called a fundamental lack of substance. My mother's death when I was in law school had brought Dad and me closer, though we still maintained a somewhat formal relationship. "Olivia?" His voice, warm but surprised, answered after several rings. "This is early for you." "Dad," I began, then faltered, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what I was about to say. "What's wrong?" His tone sharpened instantly, parental intuition kicking in. "My marriage is over," I said, the words surprisingly steady. "Ryan's been planning to divorce me, with Jessica's help." The silence that followed was brief but heavy. Then, "Jessica Adams, your maid of honor?" "Yes." Another pause. "I'm coming to Boston." "Dad, you don't have to—" "I'll be there by noon," he interrupted, his decision clearly made. "Pack what you need. You're not staying in that house." I wanted to protest, to insist I could handle this on my own. But the thought of my father's steady presence, his analytical mind and unwavering support, brought unexpected relief. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," he replied gruffly. "Just be ready to leave when I get there." After hanging up, I moved through the house with purpose, gathering essential documents from our home office, tax returns, property deeds, insurance policies, anything that might give me insight into whatever financial scheme Ryan and Jessica had been concocting. In the study, I carefully searched Ryan's desk drawers, photographing anything that seemed relevant. The third drawer down contained a surprise, a small velvet box holding a pair of diamond earrings I'd never seen before. The receipt tucked underneath confirmed my suspicions. Purchased 3 weeks ago from Tiffany's. Definitely not for me. I left them exactly as I'd found them, but not before taking photos of both the earrings and the receipt. Next, I tackled Ryan's computer. Unsurprisingly, it was password protected, but I knew most of his usual combinations. After 3 failed attempts, I tried Jessica A. 1984, her birth year. The desktop appeared. My hands trembled slightly as I navigated through his files. Most were related to cases or routine business matters, but a folder labeled Personal Assets caught my attention. Inside were spreadsheets and PDFs detailing financial holdings I'd never known about, investment accounts, property in Vermont, an LLC established 6 months ago. I connected my external hard drive and copied everything, careful not to disturb the original files. Then I methodically searched his email, finding correspondence with a financial advisor I'd never heard of and several exchanges with Jessica about restructuring and securing assets pre-filing. By 8:30, I had gathered more evidence than I'd expected to find. Either Ryan was overconfident, or he simply didn't believe I'd have the wherewithal to investigate. Either way, his underestimation of me was becoming a significant advantage. Backed up all the files, disconnected my drive, and carefully returned the computer to its exact position. Then I went upstairs to pack. Diana lived in a renovated Victorian in Cambridge, the kind of home featured in architectural magazines, which it had been twice after my redesign of her space 3 years ago. The contrast between her warm, vibrant decor and my current emotional state couldn't have been more stark as I sat in her sunroom, cradling a mug of strong coffee. "Start from the beginning," she said, her dark eyes intent on my face. "Leave nothing out." So I told her everything: the overheard conversation, the discovery of the divorce papers, the confrontation, my night of research, and the evidence I'd gathered that morning. Diana listened without interruption, her expression growing harder with each revelation. When I finally finished, she set down her mug with deliberate care. "Those calculating, duplicitous bastards," she said quietly. "On your birthday, no less." I still can't quite believe it, I admitted. 15 years of marriage, 20 years of friendship with Jessica. Was it all a lie? Diana reached across the table to grasp my hand. Not all of it, but enough to make what comes next absolutely necessary. She straightened, a familiar determination settling over her features. "You need 3 things immediately: a lawyer, a forensic accountant, and a private investigator." I nodded. "I've already called Catherine Blackwell." "The executor?" Diana's eyebrows rose. "Good choice. She eviscerated my sister's ex-husband in their divorce, left him with his toothbrush and not much else. I'm waiting for her office to call back. As for the others—" "I know people," Diana interrupted, already reaching for her phone. "Harrison Ford, no relation to the actor unfortunately, is the best forensic accountant in New England. And Melissa Chen is a former FBI agent who now specializes in matrimonial investigations. They're both discreet and utterly merciless." As Diana made calls, arranging appointments with an efficiency that reminded me why she'd been so successful in managing her late husband's business affairs, I felt the first genuine sense of hope since discovering Ryan and Jessica's betrayal. "Diana," I said when she finished, "why are you helping me like this?" She fixed me with a steady gaze. 3 reasons. First, I despise cheaters and liars on principle. Second, you're my friend and my designer, and I protect what's mine. Her expression softened slightly. And third, 14 years ago, my husband's business partner tried to do to me exactly what Ryan and Jessica are trying to do to you. The difference is, I saw it coming and destroyed him before he could make his move. I had no idea, I said, genuinely surprised. Diana had never shared much about her past before meeting her late husband. "It's not something I advertise," she replied with a small shrug, "but I learned valuable lessons from the experience. Lessons I'm happy to pass on to you now." My phone chimed with an incoming call. Catherine Blackwell's office. The receptionist informed me that Ms. Blackwell had reviewed my message and could see me at 11:30 that morning. "I'll drive you," Diana offered after I ended the call. "And while we wait for your appointment, we're going to make a list of every asset, account, and investment you know about. Then we'll make a second list of everyone who might have information about what Ryan's been hiding. Jessica would know everything," I said bitterly. "Yes, but she's not our only option. Think broader. His assistant at the firm, his golf buddies, even the bartender at that pretentious club he belongs to. Everyone talks to someone." Diana's methodical approach was exactly what I needed. A clear strategy to focus on rather than the emotional devastation that threatened to overwhelm me whenever I let my guard down. By the time we left for my appointment with Catherine Blackwell, We had compiled comprehensive lists and a rough timeline of when Ryan's behavior had first started changing. Diana had also arranged for me to meet with the forensic accountant that afternoon and the private investigator the following morning. "Your father is coming, you said?" Diana asked as we drove downtown. "Yes, he should be arriving around noon. I told him I'd meet him after my appointment with Ms. Blackwell." "Good. You need your allies close right now." She glanced at me as she navigated through traffic. "You can stay with me as long as you need to, but having family support is important." "I'm not sure where I'll go after this," I admitted. "The Cape with my father, maybe. Or a hotel until I figure things out." "One step at a time," Diana advised. "Right now, focus on binding Ryan's hands legally before he can move any more assets. Catherine will help with that." Catherine Blackwell's office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building with expansive views of Boston Harbor. The reception area was minimalist and elegant, projecting quiet confidence rather than ostentation. I was shown into her office precisely at 11:30. Catherine herself was not what I expected. Petite, perhaps mid-50s, with a silver pixie cut and rimless glasses. She could have been someone's stylish aunt rather than Boston's most feared divorce attorney. That impression lasted exactly as long as it took her to begin speaking. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative as she gestured for me to sit. "I reviewed the information you provided over the phone. You have my undivided attention for the next hour. Use it wisely." I presented my case as coherently as possible, providing the timeline, the evidence I'd gathered, and copies of the divorce papers Ryan had planned to serve me. Catherine listened intently, occasionally making notes, but mostly watching me with laser-like focus. When I finished, she removed her glasses and leaned forward. "Your husband made 3 critical mistakes," she said matter-of-factly. "First, he created a documented paper trail of his attempt to hide marital assets. Second, he involved a third party, Ms. Adams, in this scheme, creating a witness who could potentially be turned. And third," she smiled thinly, "he underestimated you." "Can we stop him from hiding more assets?" "We can do better than that," Catherine replied, already typing on her computer. "We can freeze everything while we conduct a comprehensive forensic accounting. Given what you've shown me, I can file for an emergency injunction this afternoon. By close of business today, your husband will be legally prohibited from moving, selling, or transferring any assets." Relief washed over me. "That quickly?" "The evidence of attempted financial fraud is clear. Judges don't look kindly on attorneys who try to manipulate the system they're sworn to uphold." She paused, studying me. "However, there's the matter of your living situation. I strongly advise against remaining in the marital home while this proceeds. My father is coming from Cape Cod. I'll be staying elsewhere." "Good." Catherine made another note. "Now, about Ms. Adams. Her involvement complicates matters, but potentially in your favor. If she's been helping your husband hide assets, she may have violated several ethical guidelines related to the foundation she directs. That gives us leverage." "I don't want to destroy the foundation," I clarified. "They do important work for underprivileged children." Catherine's expression softened fractionally. "Admirable. But understand that in divorces of this nature, maintaining moral high ground often comes at a financial cost. Are you prepared for that possibility?" I thought about the business I'd built, the clients who respected me, the reputation I'd established independent of Ryan's name and connections. "I'm not interested in punishing Ryan by taking everything," I said slowly. "But I won't allow him to take what's rightfully mine or to profit from his deception. I want what's fair, what I've earned." Catherine nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "Then we'll proceed immediately. My paralegal will take your statement and begin drafting the emergency injunction. I'll also need you to sign authorizations for financial investigations." As the meeting continued, with Catherine outlining our immediate strategy and long-term approach, I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from the chaos of the past 24 hours. This wasn't just about saving my financial future. It was about reclaiming my agency, my dignity, and my power from those who had attempted to steal it through deception and betrayal. By the time I left Catherine's office an hour later, the wheels of justice were already in motion. The emergency. Injunction would be filed by 2:00 p.m., and Ryan would be served with papers by the end of the day, a fitting irony given his own plans to serve me. Outside, Diana waited in her car as promised. Her expectant expression asked the question before she could voice it. "It's done," I told her as I buckled my seatbelt. "Catherine is filing for an emergency freeze on all assets today. Ryan will be served by this evening." Diana's smile was fierce with satisfaction. "Good. Now we move to Phase 2. Phase 2? Building your war chest, gathering your army, and preparing for the battle ahead." She pulled into traffic with decisive energy. "You've survived the ambush, Olivia. Now it's time to launch the counterattack." For the first time since overhearing that devastating conversation in Ryan's study, I felt something beyond shock and betrayal, something that felt dangerously close to anticipation. Ryan and Jessica had spent months planning my downfall in secret. They would spend much longer witnessing my resurgence in public. While Diana navigated through downtown Boston traffic, her words echoed in my mind. Building your war chest, gathering your army, preparing for battle. The military metaphors should have felt foreign to me. I was an interior designer, not a strategist, but somehow they resonated perfectly with the situation I now faced. Have you ever had that moment when your entire perception shifts? When the story you've been living suddenly reveals itself as fiction? That's where I found myself on the morning after my 35th birthday, standing in the ruins of what I'd thought was my life, forced to acknowledge that the foundation had been crumbling for longer than I'd realized. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. "Ryan, where are you? We need to talk about this like adults. You're being irrational." I showed the message to Diana, who snorted derisively. The classic gaslighting trifecta, demanding a conversation on his terms, positioning himself as the adult, and dismissing your legitimate reactions as irrational, vintage manipulator tactics. "Should I respond?" I asked, uncertain. "Not yet," Diana advised. "Let him wonder. Let him worry. Every unanswered message increases his uncertainty and gives you more power in the situation." As we pulled up to a small cafe to meet my father for lunch before my appointment with the forensic accountant, I caught my reflection in the side mirror. I looked different somehow, my features sharper, my eyes clearer, my expression more resolved. The woman who had spent 15 years as Ryan Mitchell's wife was disappearing, revealing someone stronger underneath. I wondered how many others had faced similar moments of revelation and reckoning. How many had discovered betrayal at the hands of those they trusted most? How many had been forced to rebuild their lives from shattered pieces? And most importantly, how many had emerged not just intact, but transformed? These questions would guide me through the coming days and weeks as I navigated the complex process of untangling my life from Ryan's and reclaiming what was mine. I didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't face it alone. I had Diana, fierce and strategic. I had my father, principled and unwavering. I had Catherine Blackwell, a legal gladiator ready to champion my cause. And I had myself, the self I'd almost forgotten during years of compromise and accommodation, now awakening with renewed purpose. I stepped out of Diana's car, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the cafe where my father waited. Each step felt like a declaration. I would not be broken by betrayal. I would not be defined by deception. I would emerge from this crucible as a woman of my own making. And that journey, that transformation, was just beginning. My father was waiting at a corner table when Diana and I entered the cafe. Robert Walsh had always been an imposing figure, 6'2" with broad shoulders and the erect posture of someone accustomed to commanding attention in lecture halls. At 68, his hair had gone completely silver, but his sharp blue eyes, the same color as mine, missed nothing. When he spotted me, he stood immediately, his expression a mixture of concern and barely contained anger. "Olivia," he said simply, enfolding me in a brief but tight embrace. His cologne, the same sandalwood scent he'd worn since I was a child, brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "Dad, this is Diana Reynolds," I said when he released me. "She's been my lifeline through all of this." My father extended his hand. "Robert Walsh, thank you for looking after my daughter." "She'd do the same for me," Diana replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Your daughter is stronger than she realizes." We settled at the table, ordering lunch despite my complete lack of appetite. My father waited until the server had left before speaking again. "I've cleared my schedule for the next 2 weeks," he informed me. "Nancy sends her love and says the guest room is ready whenever you want it." Nancy, my stepmother of 8 years, had always been kind if somewhat reserved. The thought of their peaceful Cape Cod home, with its ocean views and distance from Boston, held definite appeal. "I've already met with a divorce attorney," I told him. "Catherine Blackwell. She's filing for an emergency injunction this afternoon to freeze all our assets." My father nodded approvingly. "Smart move. Ryan won't see that coming. He'll expect you to be too emotional to act quickly." "That's exactly what he's counting on," Diana added. "The texts he's been sending Olivia are classic manipulation, making her seem irrational while positioning himself as the reasonable party." My phone had buzzed 3 more times during our drive to the cafe. I hadn't looked at the messages, but each notification felt like a small assault, a reminder of the ongoing battle. "After lunch, I'm meeting with a forensic accountant," I continued, picking at my salad without interest. "Diana arranged it. And tomorrow morning, a private investigator." My father's eyebrows rose. "You've been busy." "I haven't had much choice," I replied, finally setting my fork down. "Ryan's been planning this for months. I have hours to catch up." "Tell me exactly what happened," my father said, his professor's analytical mind clearly engaged. "Everything you remember from the conversation you overheard?" I recounted the details once more, my voice steadier with each retelling. When I mentioned the offshore accounts and property transfers, my father's expression darkened. "That's financial fraud," he said flatly. "Not just morally reprehensible, but potentially criminal, especially if foundation funds are involved." Diana leaned forward. "That's what I've been thinking. If Jessica has been misusing the Adams Foundation resources or connections to help Ryan hide assets, it could destroy them both professionally," my father finished. "The Foundation's board would have to act to protect their reputation. And the Massachusetts Bar Association takes a very dim view of attorneys who engage in financial impropriety." The implications were staggering. I had been focused on protecting myself financially, on ensuring I received my fair share in the divorce. But my father and Diana were thinking bigger, about the potential professional consequences for Ryan and Jessica. "I don't want to destroy them," I said slowly, the same hesitation I'd expressed to Catherine returning. "They didn't extend you." "The same courtesy," my father pointed out, his tone gentle but firm. "This isn't about vengeance, Olivia. It's about justice, about holding them accountable for their actions." Diana nodded agreement. "Besides, we're not fabricating anything. If they've committed ethical violations or financial fraud, those are their choices, their actions. We're merely bringing them to light." I thought about Ryan's face when I'd confronted him in his study, the momentary shock giving way to calculation, already planning his next move. And Jessica's smooth attempt to regain control of the narrative, to postpone the conversation until she could regroup. "You're right," I said finally. "They made their choices. Now they can face the consequences. My father squeezed my hand. That's my girl. After lunch, while Diana drove me to meet Harrison Ford, the forensic accountant, my father headed to my house to collect the essential items I'd packed earlier. We agreed to meet that evening at Diana's home to discuss next steps. Harrison Ford's office was located in a converted warehouse in Seaport, the industrial aesthetic softened by modern art and comfortable furniture. The man himself defied the Yahidi stereotype of an accountant, mid-40s, athletic build, dressed in jeans and a casual button-down rather than a suit. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. Ms. Mitchell, I understand you're dealing with a suspected case of hidden marital assets, he said after introductions were complete. Yes. My husband has been planning to divorce me, and appears to have been concealing significant assets in preparation. Harrison nodded. Unfortunately, it's a common scenario. Fortunately, those attempting to hide assets often make predictable mistakes. He opened a leather portfolio on his desk. Diana has briefed me on the basics. Now I need you to tell me everything you know about your financial situation. Joint accounts, properties, investments, business interests. Everything. For the next 2 hours, Harrison guided me through a comprehensive assessment of my marital finances. I was surprised by how much I knew, and disturbed by how much I didn't. Ryan had always insisted on maintaining primary control over our investments and major financial decisions, positioning it as freeing me to focus on my design business rather than what he called the boring stuff. This is very helpful, Harrison said as we concluded. Based on what you've told me and the documents you've provided, I can already identify several red flags that suggest hidden assets. Such as? I asked. The pattern of cash withdrawals from your joint account over the past 6 months, small enough individually to avoid immediate notice, but totaling over $40,000. The creation of an LLC with minimal documentation. The property was purchased in Vermont through a holding company. He tapped his notes. These are classic techniques for shielding assets from divorce proceedings. Can you trace it all? Harrison smiled thinly. Ms. Mitchell, I've spent 20 years following money trails that very clever people have tried to hide. With the documentation you've already secured and the court orders your attorney is obtaining, I can find where every penny has gone. It may take some time, but money always leaves a trail. His confidence was reassuring. As Diana and I left his office, I felt a growing sense of purpose, of momentum building in my favor. Next stop? Diana asked as we returned to her car. I need to check my business accounts and client files, I said. I want to make sure Ryan hasn't tried to interfere with my professional finances. Good thinking. We can do that from my home office. Evening we gathered in Diana's elegant living room. Myself, my father, Diana, and Catherine Blackwell, who had arrived directly from court. The emergency injunction had been granted. All marital assets were officially frozen. Ryan was served with the papers at his office approximately 1 hour ago, Catherine informed us, a hint of satisfaction in her professional tone. His attorney called me almost immediately. Who's representing him? I asked. Maxwell Stevens. Catherine's lip curled slightly. A capable lawyer, but prone to bluster rather than substance. He seemed quite surprised by our rapid response. My father snorted. I bet he was. They were expecting to control the timing completely. Catherine nodded. Mr. Stevens requested an immediate meeting between all parties to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding amicably. What did you tell him? Diana asked. That my client requires time to conduct a full accounting of marital assets before any negotiations can proceed. Catherine turned to me. I've scheduled a complete deposition for next week. In the meantime, we'll proceed with discovery and continue gathering evidence. I nodded, feeling oddly detached from the legal proceedings that were now in motion. What about Jessica Adams? How does she factor into this legally? That depends on the evidence we uncover. Catherine replied. If she actively participated in concealing marital assets or misused foundation resources, she could face both civil and professional consequences. At minimum, she could be deposed as a witness in your divorce proceedings. My father, who had been reviewing the files from Harrison Ford, looked up. Olivia, the forensic accountant, has identified 3 specific transactions that directly link Jessica to the Vermont property purchase. She was the notary on the documents, but there's evidence suggesting she may also have a financial interest in the property itself. This revelation hit me harder than expected. It was one thing to know Jessica had been helping Ryan plan the divorce, but to learn she might actually be financially benefiting from their scheme felt like a fresh betrayal. We need to inform the Adams Foundation Board, Diana said firmly. They should know that their director may be involved in questionable financial activities. Not yet, Catherine cautioned. We need more concrete evidence before making such serious allegations. The foundation has significant resources and would likely close ranks to protect their reputation. So, what's our next move? I asked, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by the complexity of it all. Catherine consulted her notebook. First, we complete the financial investigation. Harrison Ford will have preliminary findings by Friday. Second, the private investigator begins surveillance tomorrow to document any ongoing communication or meetings between your husband and Ms. Adams. Third, we prepare for your deposition and develop our negotiation strategy. My father added, and you focus on taking care of yourself, Olivia. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Diana nodded agreement. Robert's right. You need to protect your health and your business through all of this. Your design clients still need you. I thought about my upcoming projects, the waterfront condo renovation, the boutique hotel lobby redesign, the historical society consultation. Work has always been my anchor, my creative outlet. Perhaps it could be my sanctuary now. I have an idea, I said slowly. One that might solve several problems at once. They all looked at me expectantly. The Coastal Living magazine feature, I explained. They've been asking to do a spread on our home for months, Ryan's and mine. I've always put them off because Ryan was concerned about privacy, but now, Diana caught on immediately. Now you have every reason to invite them in. It establishes your professional connection to the property, documents your design work, and creates a public record of the home's contents and value. Exactly. And it gives me a legitimate reason to be in the house regularly over the next few weeks, supervising photography, preparing spaces, working with the magazine team. Catherine considered this. It's unorthodox, but potentially effective. Just be careful. Not to remove anything that could be considered a marital asset without proper documentation. I won't, I promised, but having access to the house means having access to any evidence Ryan might have missed. My father smiled for the first time since arriving in Boston. Strategic thinking. I always knew you had my analytical mind beneath all that artistic talent. For the remainder of the evening, we refined our approach, identifying potential pitfalls and developing contingency plans. By the time we finished, it was nearly midnight, and exhaustion had finally caught up with me after more than 36 sleepless hours. Diana showed my father and me to adjacent guest rooms. The space was impeccably designed. I had selected the soothing blue-gray color palette myself during the renovation, but even the comfortable surroundings couldn't immediately quiet my racing thoughts. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a new message. I had been ignoring Ryan's texts all day, but this one was from Jessica. We need to talk, just us. There are things you don't understand. Please, Olivia, for the sake of our friendship. I stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions washing over me, anger, hurt, curiosity, and beneath it all, a growing resolve. After a moment's consideration, I typed a reply. Tomorrow. Noon. The Common. Come alone. Then I turned off my phone and placed it on the nightstand. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating, face to face, with the woman who had been my closest friend for 20 years and was now a central figure in my husband's betrayal. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I slept deeply and dreamlessly. Boston Common was bustling with the usual midday activity, tourists following the Freedom Trail, office workers enjoying their lunch breaks on benches, children feeding the ducks in the pond. I arrived early, selecting a bench that offered both privacy and a clear view of all approaching paths. Diana had insisted on accompanying me, though she remained at a discreet distance, pretending to read on a bench about 50 feet away. I had dressed with care that morning, a navy sheath dress that conveyed both professionalism and confidence, paired with low heels and minimal jewelry. My hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, my makeup subtle but flawless. Physical appearance shouldn't matter in moments like this, but psychology does. And I wanted to project strength rather than vulnerability. At precisely noon, I spotted Jessica approaching from the Beacon Street entrance. Even from a distance, I could tell she was nervous. Her normally fluid stride was slightly stilted, and she kept adjusting her designer handbag. She wore white linen pants and a pale pink blouse, looking every bit the successful foundation director despite the circumstances. When she saw me. She hesitated momentarily before continuing forward. I remained seated, forcing her to come to me rather than meeting her halfway. A small power play, perhaps, but one that felt necessary. "Olivia," she said as she reached me, her voice carrying a forced lightness. "Thank you for meeting me," I gestured, to the space beside me on the bench. "You said you wanted to talk, so talk." Jessica sat, maintaining a careful distance between us. Up close, I could see the strain beneath her perfect makeup, the slight puffiness around her eyes, the tension in her jaw. "This isn't how any of this was supposed to happen," she began, staring out at the pond rather than looking at me directly. "How was it supposed to happen, Jessica? Was I supposed to sign the divorce papers without question? Hand over 15. Years of my life without a fight?" She winced. "You're making it sound malicious. Secretly planning to serve me divorce papers on my birthday while helping my husband hide our marital assets?" I replied evenly. "What would you call it?" Jessica finally turned to face me. "Complicated, messy, wrong in execution but not entirely in intent," she sighed, pushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Ryan was going to leave regardless, Olivia. I was trying to make it less painful for everyone." The audacity of her statement sent a wave of cold anger through me. Less painful? By conspiring behind my back? By betraying 20 years of friendship? "You weren't happy," she insisted. "Neither of you were. You were living parallel lives, barely connecting. The passion was gone. And you know how? From the pillow talk with my husband?" Jessica flinched. "It wasn't like that. Not at first. We were just talking. About the foundation, about his work with us. Then about your marriage, his frustrations, his sense that you two had grown apart. And, naturally, you were there to comfort him," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "It evolved gradually," she said, as if that somehow justified everything. "We didn't plan for it to happen." I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "But you certainly planned everything that came after, didn't you? The offshore accounts, the property transfers, the secret meetings." Jessica's expression changed, surprise briefly flickering across her features. "How did you know about those? I'm not the naive fool you and Ryan took me for." I leaned slightly closer. "I know about the Vermont property, Jessica, the one where your name appears on the documents. I know about the cash withdrawals, the LLC, all of it." She paled visibly. "Olivia, you have to understand. Ryan was worried about protecting the assets he'd worked so hard to build." Assets we built together, I corrected. During 15 years of marriage where I supported his career, built a business of my own, and created the home and lifestyle that helped him project the perfect image to clients and colleagues. Jessica went quiet for a moment. When she spoke, again her voice was softer. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe that. But you did hurt me. Knowingly, repeatedly. Every time you met with Ryan behind my back. Every time you discuss how to blindside me with divorce papers. Every time you helped him conceal what was legally mine. What do you want? She asked finally. Why did you agree to meet me today? I studied her face. The face of the woman who had been my maid of honor, my confidant, my friend through law school and career changes and my mother's death. The face that now belonged to a stranger. I wanted to look you in the eyes, I said quietly. I wanted to understand how someone I trusted so completely could betray me so thoroughly. But looking at you now, I realize there's nothing to understand. You made your choices, Jessica. And now you'll live with the consequences. What does that mean? A note of alarm entered her voice. It means the Adams Foundation Board will be receiving some very interesting information about their director's involvement in a scheme to hide marital assets. It means your name will appear in court documents detailing financial impropriety. It means the reputation you've worked so hard to build is about to face significant challenges. The pattern is clear, Harrison said, highlighting a series of entries on a spreadsheet. Over the past 7 months, the Adams Foundation paid Ryan's newly formed LLC, Mitchell Legal Consulting, a total of $320,000 for what's described as specialized legal services. That's not unusual in itself, Catherine noted. Foundations often retain legal counsel. True, Harrison agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. He pointed to another document. These funds weren't used for any discernible legal work. Instead, they were immediately transferred to this holding company, Green Mountain Investments, which then purchased the Vermont property for $275,000 cash, with the remaining $45,000 going toward renovations. My father leaned forward, examining the documents. And the ownership structure of Green Mountain Investments? That's the smoking gun, Harrison replied, sliding over an incorporation document. Green Mountain is owned 60-40 by Ryan Mitchell and Jessica Adams, respectively. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Jessica hadn't just been helping Ryan hide assets, she'd been actively participating in diverting foundation funds for personal gain. That's embezzlement, Diana said flatly. Catherine nodded. At minimum, it's a serious breach of fiduciary duty. At worst, criminal misappropriation of nonprofit funds. The Adams Foundation Board needs to be informed, my father stated, his academic authority evident in his tone. This goes beyond your divorce, Olivia. It's about the integrity of a charitable organization. I felt strangely calm as I processed this new information. The Vermont property wasn't just about Ryan hiding assets from me. It represented something deeper, more calculated. A future he and Jessica had been planning together, funded by money meant for underprivileged children. There's more, Harrison continued, turning to another section of his findings. The investigation revealed similar payments from 2 other nonprofits where Ms. Adams serves on advisory committees. Smaller amounts, but following the same pattern. Additionally, Mr. Mitchell has been systematically liquidating investment accounts and transferring funds to a Cayman Islands bank. Approximately $1.2 million has moved offshore in the past 5 months. Catherine's expression hardened. This changes our approach entirely. We're no longer just dealing with hidden marital assets, but potentially criminal financial misconduct. What's our next step? I asked. I'll draft an amended court filing immediately, Catherine replied. We'll request a forensic review of the Adams Foundation finances and expand the scope of the asset freeze. Additionally, I recommend informing the Foundation's board chairman, discreetly, but promptly. Diana glanced at her watch. The chairman is Walter Prescott. I know him from charity circles. He's at the symphony fundraiser tonight. My father turned to me. Olivia, this is becoming much bigger than your divorce. Are you prepared for the potential fallout? Once this information becomes public, it will affect many lives beyond yours, Ryan's and Jessica's. I considered his question carefully. The Adams Foundation supported educational programs for hundreds of underprivileged children across Massachusetts. The other nonprofits mentioned likely had similar missions. Exposing Jessica's misconduct would inevitably create disruption for these organizations. But the alternative, allowing such blatant misuse of charitable funds to continue, was unthinkable. I'm prepared, I said finally. This isn't about punishing Ryan and Jessica anymore. It's about doing what's right. Catherine nodded approvingly. I'll coordinate with the district attorney's office. They'll want to investigate independently, especially given Ryan's connections in the legal community. What about Ryan's text? Diana reminded me. He wants to meet tonight. That makes sense now, I replied. He must have realized we've discovered the foundation connections. He's trying to contain the damage. Do not meet with him alone, Catherine cautioned. Any discussion should happen with counsel present. I wasn't planning to, I assured her. But I should respond, keep him thinking there's a chance to resolve this privately. Catherine considered this. A calculated risk, but potentially useful. Tell him you'll meet tomorrow, somewhere public. That gives us time to file the amended paperwork and inform Mr. Prescott. As the meeting continued, with Catherine and Harrison outlining next steps in the financial investigation, I felt an odd sense of detachment. Just days ago, my primary concern had been salvaging my personal dignity and financial security after discovering my husband's betrayal. Now I was at the center of what could become a major financial scandal involving one of Boston's most prominent charitable foundations. By evening, the machinery of justice was in full motion. Catherine had filed the amended court documents. Diana had arranged a discreet meeting with Walter Prescott following the symphony fundraiser. My father had connected with colleagues at Harvard Business School who specialized in nonprofit governance to provide expert support if needed. I returned to Diana's home to change for the fundraiser, not to attend, but to facilitate her accidental encounter with Prescott in the lobby afterward. As I helped her select appropriate jewelry for the evening, my phone rang with Ryan's number. You should answer, Diana advised. Keep to the script we discussed. I nodded and accepted the call, putting it on speaker so Diana could hear. Olivia, Ryan's voice came through, tense but controlled. Finally, we need to talk. Things are spiraling out of control. I'm aware, I replied coolly. This isn't what you think. There are explanations for everything Blackwell is alleging. But we need to discuss this privately, not through lawyers. When and where? I asked, following our predetermined approach. He hesitated, clearly surprised by my apparent willingness. Tomorrow? Noon? My office. Not your office. The Fairmont. Lobby restaurant. Neutral ground. Another pause. Fine, but come alone. This needs to be between us. I'll be there, I said, then ended the call before he could say more. Diana looked satisfied. Perfect. He took the bait. By noon tomorrow, the amended filings will be public record, and Prescott will have initiated an internal investigation. At the foundation. He sounded worried, I observed. He should be. His carefully constructed house of cards is collapsing, Diana replied, fastening a pearl necklace. Now, let's focus on Prescott. He's old-school Boston, values discretion and proper procedure. We need to present the information as a regrettable duty, not a vindictive attack. While Diana attended the symphony fundraiser, I remained at her home with my father, reviewing the evidence and preparing for the next day's confrontation with Ryan. Around 10 p.m., Diana called from the event. It's done, she said without preamble. Prescott was appropriately horrified. "He's calling an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Jessica will be asked to explain the questionable transactions." "How did he take it?" I asked. "Like a true Boston Brahmin, outwardly calm, inwardly seething. He said, and I quote, 'The Adams name has been synonymous with philanthropy in this city for 3 generations. If Jessica has compromised that legacy, the consequences will be severe.'" After Diana's call, I checked my email to find a message from Catherine with the finalized court filings. The legal language was precise and damning. Detailed allegations of financial impropriety, misappropriation of charitable funds, and systematic concealment of marital assets. Reading it filled me with a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. "You should try to sleep," my father advised, noticing my expression as I closed my laptop. "Tomorrow will be challenging." "I know," I sighed. "It's just, I never wanted any of this, Dad. I never wanted to be the person who brought down her husband's career or exposed her best friend's crimes. I just wanted my marriage to work." My father sat beside me on Diana's elegant sofa, his presence as reassuring now as it had been throughout my childhood. "Olivia," he said gently, "you didn't cause this situation. You're simply refusing to be its victim. There's a profound difference." I leaned against his shoulder, feeling exhausted but oddly peaceful. "When does it stop hurting?" "It doesn't. Not completely," he admitted. "But eventually, the pain transforms into something useful. Wisdom, resilience, greater capacity for compassion. Your mother used to say that pain was just growth that hadn't found its purpose yet." The mention of my mother, her strength during her illness, her grace even in her final days, brought fresh perspective. She wouldn't have wanted me to crumble under betrayal. She would have expected me to stand tall, to act with integrity even when others didn't. "Get some rest," my father urged. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you'll face it with clarity and purpose." That night, for the second time since discovering Ryan and Jessica's betrayal, I slept deeply and without dreams. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Catherine called at 7 a.m. to confirm the amended filings had been processed and to inform me that the district attorney's office had opened a preliminary inquiry into the foundation's finances. Diana was already dressed and preparing to leave for a breakfast meeting with her attorney friend who specialized in nonprofit law. My father was in the kitchen making coffee and reviewing the morning news on his iPad. "You're trending," he announced as I entered. "What?" I asked, momentarily confused. He turned the screen toward me. On the Boston Globe's website was a headline that made my stomach drop. "Prominent attorney and Adams Foundation director facing allegations of financial misconduct." The article was brief but explosive, outlining the core allegations without naming me directly, referring only to the spouse of prominent defense attorney Ryan Mitchell. It mentioned the emergency board meeting scheduled at the Adams Foundation and noted that both Ryan and Jessica had declined to comment. "That was fast," I murmured. "Financial scandals involving charities always are," my father replied, "especially when they involve names like Adams and Mitchell." My phone began buzzing with notifications, emails, text messages, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I silenced it without looking, not ready to face the public dimension of what had been, until now, a private battle. Diana returned from her breakfast meeting around 10 a.m., bringing with her the latest developments. "The foundation board meeting ended 30 minutes ago," she reported. "Jessica has been placed on administrative leave pending a complete audit. Walter Prescott has been named interim director. There are rumors that 3 other board members, with close ties to Jessica, have resigned effective immediately." "And Ryan?" I asked. "His firm has called an emergency partners meeting. Word is they're distancing themselves already, releasing a statement that Mitchell's actions were personal and not connected to the firm." The swiftness with which both Jessica and Ryan were being isolated by their professional communities was sobering. In Boston's close-knit elite circles, the appearance of impropriety could be as damaging as proven misconduct. At 11:30, I prepared to leave for my meeting with Ryan. Catherine had insisted that one of her associates be positioned nearby. Not at our table, but within sight in case Ryan became hostile or attempted to pressure me into any agreements. Remember, Catherine had advised during our morning call, this meeting is information gathering only. Make no commitments, sign nothing, agree to nothing. Listen more than you speak. Diana helped me select an outfit that projected confidence, without aggression. A tailored charcoal pantsuit with subtle burgundy accents, comfortable but authoritative. "How do I look?" I asked her as I applied a final touch of lipstick. "Like a woman who knows her worth," Diana replied with satisfaction. Ryan won't know what hit him. The Fairmont Lobby restaurant was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived, precisely on time, neither early, which might suggest eagerness, nor late, which might give Ryan a psychological advantage. Catherine's associate, a poised young woman, named Melanie, had arrived 15 minutes earlier and was seated at the bar with a clear view of the dining area. Ryan was already at a corner table, nursing what appeared to be a scotch despite the early hour. He looked uncharacteristically disheveled, his usually perfect suit slightly rumpled, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. When he saw me, he stood quickly, knocking his knee against the table and causing his drink to slosh. "Olivia," he said, his voice strained as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I took the seat across from him, maintaining direct eye contact. "You said we needed to talk. I'm listening." Ryan glanced around nervously before leaning forward. "This has gone too far. The media coverage, the Foundation investigation, the DA's inquiry. None of this was supposed to happen." "What was supposed to happen, Ryan?" I asked calmly. "I signed divorce papers on my birthday without question. You and Jessica ride off into the sunset with money meant for underprivileged children? Walk me through the plan." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that. The foundation payments were legitimate legal consulting fees. For a property held jointly by you and Jessica, consulting fees that went directly into renovations for your love nest?" I shook my head. "Even if I believed you, the DA's office won't." "You can stop this," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Tell Catherine to withdraw the allegations about the foundation. We can settle the divorce fairly, quietly." "Define fairly," I replied. Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "I've prepared an offer. 50% of all visible assets. The house is yours. My pension remains mine. We each keep our separate businesses intact." "And the offshore accounts? The Cayman transfers? The Vermont property?" He blinked rapidly. "That's complicated." "No, Ryan. It's actually very simple." I didn't touch the document he'd pushed toward me. "You committed financial fraud. You misappropriated charitable funds. You betrayed not just me, but the entire community that trusted the Adams Foundation." "I can fix this," he insisted. "If you call off the DA, if you help smooth things over with the foundation board." "Why would I do that?" "Because despite everything, we were married for 15 years. His voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. He lowered it again. "Whatever you think of me now, we built a life together. You don't want to see me disbarred, possibly, facing criminal charges." I studied him. This man I had loved, supported, believed in for so long. Looking at him now, I felt neither hatred nor love, just a profound sadness for what could have been. "You're right about one thing," I said finally. "We did build a life together. A life you were willing to destroy for your own benefit. Now you're facing the consequences of those choices." "So that's it? Revenge?" Ryan's expression hardened, the desperation giving way to anger. "I didn't think you were that petty." "This isn't revenge, Ryan. It's accountability. I stood, gathering my purse. The DA's investigation will proceed. The foundation audit will continue. The divorce will be handled through proper legal channels. Whatever happens next is the natural result of actions you chose to take. As I turned to leave, Ryan grabbed my wrist, not violently but firmly enough to stop me. "Olivia, please. I'm asking you, begging you, to show some mercy here." I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. "The time to ask for mercy was before you planned to serve me divorce papers at my birthday party," I said quietly. "Before you conspired with my best friend to steal what we built together. Before you misused charitable funds meant to help children who have nothing." With that, I walked away, feeling Ryan's gaze burning into my back but not turning around. Melanie, Catherine's associate, discreetly followed me out of the restaurant, providing a silent buffer between me and any potential pursuit. Outside, the September air felt crisp and cleansing. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I took a deep breath that didn't hurt. The confrontation with Ryan hadn't provided closure. Nothing so neat was possible in this messy human drama, but it had crystallized something important within me. I wasn't fighting for my marriage anymore. I wasn't even fighting against Ryan and Jessica. I was fighting for something larger, for integrity, for accountability, for the principle that actions have consequences, regardless of wealth or social position. And that was a battle worth waging, no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. The week following my confrontation with Ryan passed in a blur of legal meetings, media avoidance, and quiet strategic planning. The story had exploded across Boston's social and business circles, with new developments emerging daily. The Adams Foundation had announced a comprehensive forensic audit, temporarily suspending several programs while they assessed the financial damage. Jessica had resigned her position rather than face termination, releasing a carefully worded statement about stepping back to address personal matters. 3 other foundation executives with ties to the questionable transactions had also departed. Ryan's law firm had placed him on indefinite leave pending the outcome of investigations. Rumors circulated that his partnership agreement contained a moral conduct clause that would allow the firm to sever ties completely if criminal charges were filed. Through it all, I maintained public silence, declining all interview requests and limiting my communications to formal statements through Catherine. Privately, however, I was busier than ever, meeting with Harrison Ford to track down every hidden asset, consulting with Diana about the strategic management of my design business during the crisis, and working with Catherine to prepare for the lengthy legal process ahead. 10 days after my birthday party, I met with Melissa Chen, the private investigator Diana had recommended. Unlike Harrison's clinical approach to financial forensics, Melissa's investigative style was more personal, focusing on the human elements of deception. "People leave 2 kinds of trails," she explained during our meeting at Catherine's office. "Paper trails and people trails. We've got the paper trails covered with the financial investigation. Now we need to follow the people's trails." "What does that involve?" I asked. "Interviews? Background checks? Timeline construction?" Melissa opened a slim leather portfolio. "I've already interviewed 3 people from Ryan's firm, 2 from the foundation, and your former housekeeper, Maria." I blinked in surprise. "Maria? She left our employ 3 months ago." "Exactly. According to Maria, she was let go after accidentally walking in on Ryan and Jessica in your home office. She was given 3 months severance with an NDA, which she signed because she needed the money for her daughter's college tuition." This new betrayal, occurring in my own home, felt like another punch to the gut. I had no idea. Ryan told me she'd found a better position with a family in Cambridge. Melissa nodded sympathetically. "That's consistent with the pattern we're seeing. Ryan was systematic about eliminating potential witnesses or variables that might disrupt his plan." "What else have you found?" "The Vermont property was purchased 6 months ago, but renovations began nearly 10 months ago, suggesting the plan was in motion well before the actual purchase. Additionally, Jessica has been photographed at the property multiple times over the past year, initially with Foundation, board members ostensibly for retreats, but more recently alone with Ryan. The timeline was becoming clearer and more painful. Their betrayal hadn't been a recent development or a momentary lapse. It had been methodically orchestrated over at least a year. "There's something else," Melissa continued, hesitation evident in her voice. "Something that might be personally difficult." "Go on," I said, bracing myself. "We've found evidence suggesting Jessica may have been involved with Ryan intermittently throughout your marriage. Not continuously, but periodically. There are hotel receipts dating back several years, usually coinciding with out-of-town legal conferences where Jessica attended as a Foundation representative." I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this new information. The Foundation connection had been there from the beginning, the perfect cover for their relationship, hiding in plain sight behind charitable work and professional collaboration. "I suspected as much," I said finally, surprised by my own calm. "There were moments over the years, small inconsistencies, explanations that never quite felt right. I chose to trust rather than question." "That's not a weakness," Catherine interjected from across the table. "Trust is the foundation of marriage. Ryan's betrayal of that trust is his failure, not yours." I nodded, grateful for her perspective. "What impact does this have on our legal strategy?" "Significant," Catherine replied. "It establishes a pattern of deception rather than a recent development. It potentially involves misuse of Foundation resources over a longer period. And it undermines any claim Ryan might make that the marriage broke down recently, or due to any action on your part." As we continued discussing the investigation's findings, my phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Walter Prescott wants to meet. With you. Foundation matter, not personal. Should I arrange?" I showed the message to Catherine, who considered it briefly. "Potentially useful," she said. "The Foundation will be conducting its own damage control. Understanding their approach could be beneficial." I agreed to the meeting, which Diana arranged for the following afternoon at her home, neutral territory that offered privacy from media scrutiny. Walter Prescott proved to be exactly as Diana had described him, the quintessential Boston Brahmin, tall and silver-haired with the bearing of someone accustomed to wielding influence quietly but effectively. Despite the circumstances, his manner was impeccably courteous as Diana made introductions. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, then caught himself. "Ms. Walsh, I should say. Thank you for agreeing to meet. This is an extraordinarily difficult situation for all concerned." "Indeed," I replied, matching his formal tone. "Especially for the children, served by the Foundation's programs." He nodded, appreciation flickering in his eyes for my focus on the Foundation's mission rather than personal grievances. "That's precisely why I wanted to speak with you directly," he said. "The Foundation is facing a crisis of confidence with donors and partners. The audit has already identified approximately $875,000 in questionable transactions potentially linked to Ms. Adams and your husband." I maintained a neutral expression despite my shock at the amount, significantly higher than our initial estimates. "The board is committed to full transparency and accountability," Prescott continued. "But we're concerned about the Foundation's survival. 3 generations of good work shouldn't be destroyed by one director's misconduct." "I agree completely," I said sincerely. "The Foundation's mission is invaluable to this community. Then perhaps we can find a path forward that serves justice, without destroying the institution." Prescott leaned forward slightly. "The board is prepared to fully cooperate with all investigations and to implement whatever governance reforms are necessary. In return, we hope you might consider issuing a public statement expressing confidence in the Foundation's future and separating the institution from the actions of individuals." It was a reasonable request, one that acknowledged the harm done, while creating space for the Foundation to rebuild. After consulting briefly with Catherine, who had accompanied me to the meeting, I agreed to issue a carefully worded statement supporting the Foundation's mission while emphasizing the importance of accountability. Prescott seemed genuinely relieved. "Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Your graciousness in these circumstances is remarkable." As he was preparing to leave, he paused. "There's one more matter, somewhat delicate. In reviewing the Foundation's governance documents, we've discovered that your mother, Elizabeth Walsh, was one of the original advisory board members when Jessica's father restructured the Foundation 20 years ago." This was news to me. My mother had been involved in numerous charitable causes before her death, but she had never mentioned a specific connection to the Adams Foundation. "Charles Adams thought highly of your mother's insight into educational needs," Prescott explained. "Her recommendations shaped several of our most successful programs." The connection was jarring, a thread linking my mother to the very foundation now entangled in my divorce. It felt like the completion of some strange circle, though I couldn't yet see its full shape. "The board would welcome your involvement," Prescott added carefully. "Not immediately, of course, but perhaps in the future, when the current situation has been resolved. Your mother's legacy deserves to be honored, and your professional experience would be valuable to our mission." The offer was unexpected but strangely appealing. A chance to transform something painful into something constructive, to build rather than merely survive. "I'll consider it," I promised, meaning it. After Prescott left, Diana joined Catherine and me in her living room, curiosity evident in her expression. "Well," she prompted, "what did our Boston patriarch want?" I explained Prescott's requests and his surprising revelation about my mother's connection to the Foundation. "Interesting strategic move," Catherine observed. "He's offering you a path to transform your role in this story, from victim of the Foundation director's misconduct to potential savior of the Foundation's mission." "It's more than strategy," Diana countered. "It's a genuine opportunity to create something meaningful from this mess, to build rather than just recover." As I considered their perspectives, I realized both were right. Prescott's offer was simultaneously strategic and sincere, political and personal. Like most significant choices in life, it couldn't be reduced to a single motivation or outcome. "I need time," I said finally, "to get through the divorce, to rebuild my own foundation before I consider helping rebuild someone else's." Diana smiled approvingly. "That's wisdom talking. One stone at a time." That evening, alone in Diana's guest room that had become my temporary sanctuary, I found myself thinking about foundations in a different sense, the unseen structures that support visible lives. My marriage had rested on a foundation I'd believed was solid but had actually been compromised from the beginning. My friendship with Jessica had been built on sand. But other foundations in my life remained strong. My relationship with my father, my professional reputation, my sense of self that had bent but not broken under betrayal's weight. These were the foundations worth reinforcing as I moved forward. I opened my laptop and began drafting plans for my next steps. Not just legal strategies or financial arrangements, but personal intentions. Where would I live after the divorce? How would I reshape my business? What boundaries would I establish in future relationships? For the first time since discovering Ryan and Jessica's betrayal, I was thinking beyond survival, beyond the immediate crisis. I was thinking about building something new. The thought brought unexpected peace as I closed my laptop and prepared for sleep. The road ahead would still be difficult, the legal battles protracted, the emotional aftershocks unpredictable. But I was no longer merely reacting to destruction. I was creating a blueprint for reconstruction. 3 months after my fateful birthday party, the legal proceedings were well underway. The emergency asset freeze remained in place. The forensic accounting had uncovered most of Ryan and Jessica's financial maneuvers, and Catherine was methodically building an unassailable case for the divorce settlement. I had established a new, Routine? Living temporarily in Diana's guest house while looking for my own place, focusing intensely on my design business, which had actually grown despite, or perhaps because of, the publicity surrounding my personal drama, and carefully rebuilding my sense of self away from the shadow of betrayal. Then came the envelope. It arrived at my office, a thick manila package with no return address, delivered by courier rather than regular mail. My assistant Tanya brought it to me with raised eyebrows. "Mysterious," she commented. "Should I open it? I'll handle it," I replied, taking the package with a strange sense of foreboding. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "You deserve to know everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to find the courage." The handwriting was vaguely familiar, but not immediately identifiable. I inserted the drive into my computer with caution, half expecting some kind of virus or trap. Instead, I found a single folder labeled Mitchell Adams Foundation Records. The contents were staggering: emails, financial records, meeting minutes, and personal correspondence dating back nearly 5 years. As I scrolled through the documents, a fuller picture emerged of Ryan and Jessica's relationship and their systematic misuse of foundation resources. But the most shocking revelation came in a subfolder labeled Original Board Structure. There, amid legal documents establishing the foundation's governance, was evidence that my mother hadn't merely served on the advisory board. She had been named as successor director in Charles Adams' original plan, a position that should have gone to her, then to me after her death, had been quietly redirected to Jessica through amended documents filed shortly after my mother passed away. My hands trembled as I opened the final document, a scan of a letter from Charles Adams to my mother dated just weeks before his own death. "Elizabeth, my dear friend, as my health fails, I find myself concerned about the foundation's future. Jessica lacks your vision for what education truly means. I've amended the succession documents to ensure your guiding hand remains even if I'm gone. The children of Boston deserve nothing less. With deepest respect, Charles." The implications were enormous. Jessica hadn't just betrayed me by having an affair with my husband. She had potentially manipulated her way into controlling a foundation that should have had my family's involvement in its leadership. A final document contained bank records, showing that shortly after Charles Adams' death, Ryan had received a substantial legal consultation fee for handling changes to the foundation's governance documents, the very changes that had removed my mother's succession rights. I sat motionless, trying to process this new layer of betrayal. Then I noticed a final note in the package, tucked inside the original envelope. "Check the name on the Vermont property deed." The full legal name. Pulling up the property records Harrison had provided, I examined the deed more carefully. The property was owned by Green Mountain Investments, but the managing partner listed was J. Elizabeth Adams. Elizabeth, my mother's name. The pieces suddenly connected. Jessica's full name was Jessica Elizabeth Adams. She had used her middle name, the same as my mother's, on legal documents related to the property, creating deliberate confusion and potentially providing plausible deniability if questions arose about her entitlement to foundation resources. I immediately called Catherine, who arrived at my office within the hour, bringing Harrison Ford with her. Together, we examined the new evidence. "This changes everything," Catherine said after reviewing the documents. "This isn't just financial impropriety or marital asset concealment. This is systematic fraud potentially dating back to Charles Adams' death." "Who sent this?" Harrison asked, examining the envelope. "I don't know," I admitted, "but the handwriting seems familiar." Diana, who had joined us by then, studied the note. "It's Margaret," she said with sudden certainty. "Margaret Chen, the foundation's former finance director. She resigned about 6 months ago, supposedly for health reasons." A quick search confirmed Diana's hunch. The handwriting matched documents Margaret had signed during her tenure at the foundation. "We need to find her," Catherine decided. "She's potentially our key witness." Within days, Melissa Chen, no relation to Margaret, had located the former finance director living quietly in a small town in western Massachusetts. Initially reluctant to speak openly, Margaret finally agreed to meet after Catherine assured her of legal protection as a whistleblower. Her testimony was damning. She had witnessed Jessica's gradual takeover of the foundation following her father's death, including the alteration of key documents with Ryan's legal assistance. She had observed their relationship developing and had documented questionable financial transactions for years, keeping records as insurance against the day she might need protection. "I didn't come forward sooner because I was afraid," Margaret admitted during our meeting. "Ryan has powerful connections in this city. And Jessica? She can be vindictive when crossed." "Why now?" I asked gently. Margaret's eyes met mine directly. "Because what they did to you was the final straw. Using charitable funds to finance their affair, planning to blindside you after 15 years of marriage." She shook her head. "Some lines shouldn't be crossed." With Margaret's evidence and testimony, Catherine filed additional motions in both the divorce proceedings and with the district attorney's office. The response was swift and decisive. The DA expanded the investigation to include potential fraud in the foundation's governance. The foundation board, under Walter Prescott's leadership, initiated legal proceedings to recover misappropriated funds. The Massachusetts Bar Association opened an ethics investigation into Ryan's professional conduct. Ryan's law firm, seeing the writing on the wall, severed ties completely. His legal career in Boston was effectively over. Jessica faced her own reckoning, removed permanently from any role with the foundation, her reputation in philanthropic circles destroyed, her family legacy tarnished by her actions. 6 months. After my birthday party, the divorce was finalized on terms that even Catherine described as exceptionally favorable. I received the house, which I promptly sold, half of all legitimate marital assets, and full compensation for the funds Ryan had attempted to hide. More significantly, the settlement included a formal acknowledgement of the foundation governance, fraud, and established a Walsh family seat on the reformed foundation board, restoring what should have been my mother's legacy. The district attorney ultimately charged both Ryan and Jessica with multiple counts of fraud and misappropriation of charitable funds. Rather than face a public trial, they accepted plea agreements that included financial restitution, community service, and for Ryan, a 5-year suspension of his law license. Justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through accountability. 1. Year after the fateful birthday party that had changed everything, I stood in the sunlit space of my newly opened design studio in Back Bay. The walls displayed photographs of my most successful projects, samples of fabrics and materials lined, custom-built shelves, and a small but growing team of designers worked at sleek desks in the open concept space. Diana, who had joined us by then, studied the note. "It's Margaret," she said with sudden certainty. "Margaret Chen, the foundation's former finance director. She resigned about 6 months ago, supposedly for health reasons." A quick search confirmed Diana's hunch. The handwriting matched documents Margaret had signed during her tenure at the foundation. "We need to find her," Catherine decided. "She's potentially our key witness." Within days, Melissa Chen, no relation to Margaret, had located the former finance director living quietly in a small town in western Massachusetts. Initially reluctant to speak openly, Margaret finally agreed to meet after Catherine assured her of legal protection as a whistleblower. Her testimony was damning. She had witnessed Jessica's gradual takeover of the foundation following her father's death, including the alteration of key documents with Ryan's legal assistance. She had observed their relationship developing and had documented questionable financial transactions for years, keeping records as insurance against the day she might need protection. "I didn't come forward sooner because I was afraid," Margaret admitted during our meeting. "Ryan has powerful connections in this city. And Jessica? She can be vindictive when crossed." "Why now?" I asked gently. Margaret's eyes met mine directly. Because what they did to you was the final straw. Using charitable funds to finance their affair, planning to blindside you after 15 years of marriage. She shook her head. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. With Margaret's evidence and testimony, Catherine filed additional motions in both the divorce proceedings and with the district attorney's office. The response was swift and decisive. The DA expanded the investigation to include potential fraud in the foundation's governance. The foundation board, under Walter Prescott's leadership, initiated legal proceedings to recover misappropriated funds. The Massachusetts Bar Association opened an ethics investigation into Ryan's professional conduct. Ryan's law firm, seeing the writing on the wall, severed ties completely. His legal career in Boston was effectively over. Jessica faced her own reckoning, removed permanently from any role with the foundation, her reputation in philanthropic circles destroyed, her family legacy tarnished by her actions. 6 months. After my birthday party, the divorce was finalized on terms that even Catherine described as exceptionally favorable. I received the house, which I promptly sold, half of all legitimate marital assets, and full compensation for the funds Ryan had attempted to hide. More significantly, the settlement included a formal acknowledgement of the foundation governance, fraud, and established a Walsh family seat on the reformed foundation board, restoring what should have been my mother's legacy. The district attorney ultimately charged both Ryan and Jessica with multiple counts of fraud and misappropriation of charitable funds. Rather than face a public trial, they accepted plea agreements that included financial restitution, community service, and for Ryan, a 5-year suspension of his law license. Justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through accountability. 1. Year after the fateful birthday party that had changed everything, I stood in the sunlit space of my newly opened design studio in Back Bay. The walls displayed photographs of my most successful projects, samples of fabrics and materials lined, custom-built shelves, and a small but growing team of designers worked at sleek desks in the open concept space. Walsh Design had not merely survived the scandal, it had thrived, my reputation for resilience and integrity attracting clients who valued both my aesthetic vision and my personal strength. Diana entered carrying a small gift bag. Happy actual. Birthday, she said, kissing my cheek. 1 year older, infinitely wiser. I smiled, accepting the package. Hard-earned wisdom. The best kind. She glanced around the studio. This place is magnificent, Olivia. You've built something remarkable here. With significant help, I acknowledged, thinking of all those who had supported me through the darkest days. Diana, my father, Catherine, even Walter Prescott, who had become both mentor and friend as I took my place on the foundation board. Speaking of help, Diana said, how was your first official board meeting yesterday? Productive. We've restructured the scholarship program to reach more students, and the Summer Arts Initiative is expanding to 3 new schools next year. The foundation work had become unexpectedly fulfilling, a way to honor my mother's memory while creating something positive from the ashes of betrayal. As we chatted, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Proud of you today. Mom would be, too. The message brought tears to my eyes. The path from betrayal to rebuilding had been neither quick nor easy. There had been days of crushing doubt, nights of aching loneliness, moments when moving forward seemed impossible. But I had moved forward, step by step, choice by choice, building a new foundation more solid than the one that had crumbled beneath. Me later that evening, surrounded by new friends and trusted allies celebrating my birthday, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The woman who had stood frozen in Ryan's study doorway, devastated by discovery, was both gone and still present, transformed rather than erased by experience. I had learned painful but necessary lessons. That trust must be balanced with awareness. That self-worth cannot depend on others' validation. That endings, however painful, often create space for new beginnings. Most importantly, I had learned my own strength, not the brittle, defensive kind that fears vulnerability, but the resilient, authentic kind that faces betrayal without becoming bitter, that seeks justice without pursuing vengeance, that rebuilds after destruction with greater wisdom and purpose. As I blew out the candles on my birthday cake, I made no wish this year. Instead, I made a promise to myself to live each day forward with the same courage, integrity, and hope that had carried me through the darkest chapter of my life. The story that had begun with betrayal had transformed into something entirely different, a testament not to what had been lost, but to what had been found, created, and reclaimed. My own voice, my own path, my own unshakable foundation. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.